welcome to Lead Without Limits, and I'm your host, Ruchiraa Sharma. This is a series of four engaging and insightful conversations focused on exploring the critical role of digital transformation in building business resilience and mitigating disruptions. The topic is how to create a digital future with tech, talent, and culture. Through this discussion, we will examine how emerging technologies can herald a new era of innovation for businesses to pivot to growth. We will also focus on data driven insights and how they can enable and empower companies to upskill the entire workforce, drive digital readiness, and data literacy. So, before we deep dive into this conversation, I would like to begin by introducing my panelists. I have with me Mr. Ramneek Khurana, co founder and head of product and technology Lenskart Solutions, Mr. Dale Vaz, CTO Swiggy, and Mr. Raghav Gupta, Managing Director, India and APAC Coursera. The topic, gentlemen, for this discussion is effectively scaling up the digital operations of startups. So, thank you all for joining in. And my first question is to you, Mr. Ramneek. Um, Recent research has shown that 2 years' worth of digital transformation was concentrated between May and June 2020 alone. And the pandemic has clearly accelerated the rate of digitization. So, coming back to startups, the startup ecosystem has also witnessed a phenomenal growth. So, could you tell us about the evolving viability of the Indian environment for the startup ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you look at Indian startup ecosystem, it has really accelerated over the past 2 years. Historically, it really started with IT services company with likes of Infosys and TCS, which brought in a lot of development talent and a lot of technology got infused in our ecosystem. Later on, with the upcoming startups which came in, which were Flipkarts of the world, it brought in a lot of product and design talent, and it helped us in further maturing the ecosystem. Now, as we all have learned to work remotely, even the startups in the US, not just the bigger players, are hiring team members from India to work in their organizations. So the positive side of that is that it is really accelerating the kind of talent that you get into the market and the maturity of the ecosystem. Also,
Right.
we are able to sell globally because of this change. And if you look at it overall, it has put us on a fantastic path towards making an ecosystem which is very, very self-sustaining and which has got mature talent. So that is something that has been a phenomenal change over the last 2 years.
Great. Thank you for sharing that insight, Mr. Ramneek. Coming to you, Mr. Dale, what is your input here? How do you think the ecosystem has changed, especially post the pandemic?
Yeah, I think adding to what Mr. Ramneek said, I think the
Mhm.
last 2 years have been an accelerant in the journey of tech innovation and tech-driven innovation across India. There's also, in addition to the international demand, there's also a huge latent demand within India and domestic demand within India, the growing middle class. There's a huge consumption
Mm.
rising within India. And startups are right at that moment where they are able to leverage their agility, they're able to leverage their speed and meet any of these unmet customer needs that we see in India. So as a startup, it's a very exciting time to be. If you look back at the last 2 years, lots of companies have had to evolve their business model to react to COVID. Even at Swiggy, we began as a food delivery company and we were pretty much in 520 different cities across India when COVID hit. And the
Wow.
entire business, if you may, had to come to a standstill, right? And very quickly, we innovated, we pivoted our business to launch a pickup and delivery service we call Swiggy Genie. We also
Mhm.
focused on building out our grocery delivery service, which is Instamart. And in August 2020, we launched Instamart. And over the last
Right.
2 years, we've seen that this this last 2 years of changing consumer trend has actually acted as a tailwind for this business, where we're seeing a lot of adoption. People are moving to these new categories, new experiences. So definitely, as a startup, I think it's a great time to be active in India. I think it's a place where you have a mix of perfect kind of different kinds of inputs coming together. You have great amount of talent, you have great amount of interest in terms of a huge market to go after, and of course you have great amount of funding interest from different players. So that's kind of the evolution we've seen over the last 2 years.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that insight. And I'd like to come to you, Mr. Raghav. What are some of the landmark changes that your organization has witnessed in the past 2 years, specifically in context of the pandemic leading to accelerated digital transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. And like Ramneek and Dale shared a little bit, for us as well, it's been a lot of growth over the last 2.5 years, Ruchiraa. And I can share a little bit of context, right? Higher education has been a big challenge in India for many, many years, as all of us have possibly personally experienced.
Mhm.
And what we've seen over the last 2 years is that we've seen massive growth at Coursera as well. We're a very mission focused company. Our goal is to enable people to transform their lives through learning. And what
Mhm.
we do as a part of this is we reach out to either students who are in higher education or to working professionals. Those are the audiences that we try and cater to. And
Sure.
over the pandemic, we've seen that there are people who are looking to learn a small, skill, so something that they could learn in 1 hour.
Mhm.
And then there are other people who want to take on a full degree, and this might be a 3 year or a 4 year undergrad degree, and they can
Mhm.
come for all of this and a lot more things to the Coursera platform. And we've also seen that we need to be able to reach these individuals, whether these are students in higher education or these are working professionals in companies,
Mhm.
people like us, either through a B2C channel or through a B2B channel.
All
And
right.
in India, before the pandemic hit, I think we used to work with about 20 odd universities who were using our content
Okay.
for their students. And then
Hmm.
through the course of the pandemic, we went from 20 odd universities to something like 3,600 universities and colleges very quickly who adopted the Coursera platform and started using our content for their students. Um, so I think the other thing that we've seen is that it is important to be able to bring high quality education in India to millions and crores of people, whether they are in companies or they are in campuses, at
Mhm.
very affordable prices as well. And I think we've been able to do that to quite an extent. When we went from 20 campuses to about 3,600 campuses using our platform, we were
Mhm.
able to do this fairly quickly and scale up fairly quickly without a fall in our ability to serve all of these learners who are coming to Coursera. So it's been a story of growth, but it's also been a story of a lot of insight driven growth. And maybe that's something that I can touch on as we go through this conversation.
Absolutely, but those are some great numbers over there, and it's true that there has been so much growth, especially when it comes to digital skills. But coming back to you, Dale, going forward, how do you think companies can leverage tech, talent, and culture to scale up in the startup ecosystem? And what were the challenges you faced while doing so?
So it's a great question. When you look at Swiggy, essentially, it's an extremely complex business to be operating in because you have three different players at any given point in time. You have a
Mhm.
consumer who is in need of something right now, right here. So it's an on-demand business. You
All
have
right.
a supplier, could be a restaurant partner, could be a store that is
Mhm.
selling product, and then you also have a driver who is also a partner working part-time, logging in and logging off when they have time, right? And so essentially
Absolutely.
what we're trying to do with this on-demand convenience business is trying to coordinate the activities of all three different players in this ecosystem and ensure that at any point in time we can match customers, drivers, and suppliers in a way that allows them to get access to the products and services they need. And on Swiggy, if you look at our delivery of the millions of orders we do on a daily basis, our average delivery time is around 34 minutes. So
Yes.
essentially, you get 34 minutes from the time the customer places the order to ensure that everything works clockwork until the product reaches the consumer's doorstep. And a lot of what we do is essentially a combination of deep data-driven insights, all the way
Mhm.
from deciding which restaurant you see. We look at customer behavior, we look at their purchase history, we look at their past browsing history,
Mhm.
and we create profiles that help us identify consumers better. So we understand if one consumer likes Italian cuisine more, while another consumer may be preferring biryani cuisines more.
All
We
right.
also profile the kind of selection we have. We look at what kind of restaurants we have. We understand what products they have, what kinds of product features that these restaurants carry. And then we dynamically try to match using AI and ML. We match
All right.
consumers to the best possible restaurants. And then when
Definitely.
the customer places the order, we also look at saying, how do we find the best possible driver whom we can assign to this
Mhm.
order? And here again, there is it's a multi-objective optimization where we are looking at saying, how do we balance out different needs? A need
Mhm.
of making sure that the order reaches the consumer on time. We also need to make sure that drivers get suitable earnings. We also need to make sure
Absolutely.
that the business viability is met. So it's a combination of all these different factors that come in, and at the heart of it, it's basically this this I guess would say having strong tech people who understand the business, who understand the operations, as well as are able to leverage deep skills in technologies like AI and deep learning and other domains to be able to bring this together.
Great. All right. Thank you for that. And Mr. Ramneek, what is your insight here? How did you overcome the challenges that you faced in scaling up, and how did you collaborate between tech, talent, and culture?
Yeah. So I think, much like Dale mentioned, companies like Swiggy and Lenskart, really the new age startups which have born over the last decade. What we are
Mm-hmm.
trying to do is we are trying to take a industry which has been there for a long time, is a
All right.
complex industry and deals with a lot of physical movement, and try to drive it using a lot of technology. So
Sure.
in our case, we are omni-channel, so we experiment a lot with the different ways of buying.
Mm-hmm.
We have a huge operation in terms of everything from diagnostic to building the eyeglass as per the prescription that the customer has given. And
All right.
unlike any other e-commerce, what we have to do is we have to make sure that we actually manufacture the eyeglass and dispatch it after the
Mm-hmm.
order is placed by the customer. So that brings in a lot of complexities in our case. And for us, the interesting challenge has been to first bring out the problems that we are working on, and
Mm-hmm.
really preach a lot on what is it that we are working on, why is it important, and why is it important and needed to make sure that the country's vision problem gets solved. Once we did that, it allowed us to build a culture where we were able to attract a lot of people who were aligned with that mission, who wanted to
All right.
work on that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were able to simply put teams behind those problems and really accelerate the growth over there. So in our case, it has been a story of finding out the difficult problems to solve,
Mm-hmm.
popularizing them, getting the right talent, and putting the talent behind them.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. But I'd like to come to you, Mr. Raghav, at this point. They all talked about data driven insights and generating data driven insights to cater to the new age customers. The biggest challenge for digital natives is to build models around customers because they're constantly evolving and asking for more. So, what are the emerging technologies and how are they influencing the future of customer experience?
So if I step back a little bit before I answer your question specifically, right, and many of us have probably experienced this over the last 5, 10 years. If one were to think about the stages of a startup per se, right,
Mm-hmm.
stage one is possibly just the idea of what we would call product market fit, right? And you're a small company. It's all about conviction. It's all about rigor. It's all about also survival to some extent. That's
Mm-hmm.
stage one.
Yeah.
Stage two then starts becoming about the business model. Can we come up with a repeatable and a profitable business model, if you will? And this is the
All right.
stage where it starts getting into everything about discipline, about execution. And I think
Mm-hmm.
what we are at, and maybe I would say maybe this applies to Swiggy and Lenskart and other larger startups in the country, including Coursera as well, is we are in the third phase, which is what I would call a scale up phase, right? Where we're becoming an enterprise, where we're becoming a team which is driven by large leadership groups, where you're essentially getting systems and processes into place, right?
Sure.
And as one goes through these phases, I think the kind of teams that we have in our company start changing as well, where we are very, founder driven or leadership driven in the first two phases, to the third phase where it becomes about finding the right talent. And to your earlier question about technology, talent, and culture. And so
Mm-hmm.
finding the right talent starts becoming important when you're, hundreds of people, thousands of people in the company.
Definitely.
And then also building the right culture starts becoming important, because your own
Mm-hmm.
personal behavior does not influence the behavior or the culture of the rest of the company. It's
All right.
more a deliberate culture that one needs to start to build.
Mm-hmm.
And in this context, one of the things that we've seen on Coursera, pre-pandemic, a lot of people who
Sure.
came to Coursera, working professionals like all of us on this discussion, would
Mm-hmm.
come to learn, either technology skills or data skills, data science skills. That's what people would come to learn on the Coursera platform. And during the pandemic, we found that because the world around us completely shifted, the kind of skills that people were looking to learn on the Coursera platform moved to communication, it moved to leadership, it moved to mindfulness, moved to personal well-being, and so on and so forth. And we've seen that with many traditional companies, but also new age companies, startups. A lot of companies are saying, look, the kind of teams that we need to have in the future as we become larger companies need to
Mhm.
possess skills which are a combination of digital skills, but also what I would call human skills. And one of the things that we've done is that while learning digital skills is more prescriptive, one can come and learn machine learning, one can come and learn Tableau as a tool, and so on and so forth. Learning
Mhm.
human skills, particularly leadership, can sometimes be fuzzy, especially when you're a working professional in a startup and you don't have time to go back to university and so on and so forth, of course. So we've launched
Alright.
something which we call the Leadership Academy, right? If you are becoming a new manager, which are those 6 skills that you should learn to be able to become a new manager, and how do you do that? Or if
Right.
you're becoming the leader of a business line and you've never
Mhm.
done that in the past, and your business is growing very quickly, so you got bumped up in the organization, how do you build
Alright.
the skills to be able to lead an organization, and so on? And I think that's been a helpful approach that we found across many of the businesses actually that we end up working with as well.
All right. Sure. So I actually wanted to put up a question to you about leadership, so I'll come back to that later. But I'd like to bring you in at this point, Mr. Ramneek. What are the critical success factors, according to you, for digital natives when it comes to data? And how are companies like yours leveraging data effectively to gain that competitive advantage?
Sure. So, I mean, I can break down the data journey into 3 steps. The number one step is first capturing the right data at
Mhm.
each of the right steps. For that, it is for us, it is interesting. It is even more interesting because we also have to capture data across our offline stores,
Yeah.
where user identities are not necessarily established as soon as they walk in, or their
Mhm.
actions are not necessarily established as soon as they're moving around and maneuvering around the store. So that is
Mhm.
really the first part, and was the interesting part for us to figure out how do you bring the online funnels to offline as well, and how do you start tracking different actions that the users are doing, the meaningful actions that users are doing across the store.
Sure.
The number two step is establishing identities so that you are
Mhm.
able to attribute the right action to the right person. And then number three is using that information to personalize and nudge the journey towards the outcome that you want to drive.
All right.
In our case, what we spent a lot of time in doing is first establishing the identity, which we did in
Mhm.
our case using phone numbers, both online and offline. When you enter into the store, the staff is now able to immediately figure out who you are, what have you been browsing online, what are your preferences, what have you bought earlier, and make recommendations to you basis that, even in a store.
All right. Great. Mr. Dale, would you like to add something here? How did you leverage data
Yeah.
effectively to gain a competitive advantage in the new normal?
Yeah, I think data is fundamental to most decisions we make at Swiggy, both within the business as well as for our consumer experience. If
Mhm.
you take a step back and think about the data volumes we are dealing with at Swiggy, we have at any point in time millions of customers on our app,
Mhm.
interacting with more than 1.9 lakh restaurants that we have
Mhm.
active.
All
And
right.
then we also have at any point in time around 2.6 lakh active drivers. Right. And
Mhm.
so when you look at the ecosystem you have across 520 different cities in India, all these millions of customers visiting restaurants, menus, buying, placing orders, you have drivers picking up packages, delivering food, you have restaurants who are processing orders, you have Instamart stores that are fulfilling orders, and all these
Yeah.
activities happening. Definitely the first thing that we did was we built out what we call the Swiggy data lake.
All
This is
right.
essentially a centralized data store which has all the information that happens across the Swiggy ecosystem. So we've instrumented different actions, we instrument different parts of our
Mhm.
journey, and we make sure the data is stored someplace. For example, to help provide customers with a great tracking experience where they can see the driver move on their screen,
Mhm.
we actually record the driver's GPS location every few seconds, and we are
All right.
storing that in our data lake. So you can imagine the amount of data we process. We process more than a billion events on any given day in our
Mhm.
data lake. And all
That's
these events are ingested into our data infrastructure and converted into tables and data schemas over which we
mhm.
have built our information processing layer. This is essentially the intelligence layer that consumes this data and builds the ML models, the analytical models that is used for intelligence.
All
So we
right.
have one part of our team that's focused on the analytics, that is providing business insight by analyzing this data. For example, this team is thinking about things like what kind of pricing policy should we have during
All right.
rains? How should we decide what delivery fee should be? Or they're thinking about saying which restaurants should we launch as part of the new IPL campaign and make sure
Yes.
that maximizes consumer demand. And so that's
Mhm.
the analytics function that focuses on our business insights. And then
All right.
separately, we have an AI and ML team that is looking at saying, how do we change consumer experience by building ML models? So
Mhm.
here you are talking about things like affect consumer experience, like the discovery and the relevance and search, personalization,
All
segmentation of
right.
experience, fulfillment, and so on. And similarly with the driver experience, things around how do we match drivers to the best possible orders? How do we maximize driver earnings? And so that's another set of products that we have. So at the final top of the layer with in the data stack that we have, we also have self-service tools that we are
All right.
providing where business teams can directly access data. So
Mhm.
here we are using some in-house tools as well as third-party tools that we have licensed, where
All
we
right.
can give business users direct access to all the data we have at any
Mhm.
point in time. Users can fire queries to be able to derive insights and get access to information they need to make business decisions. So it's a combination of having a strong data lake, which is your centralized data warehouse. And
All right.
then having both automated tools like AI and analytics-based tools, along with self-service human interfaces that people can have. And this stack, if you may, works in tandem to
Mhm.
be able to enable business decisions as well as consumer experience across Swiggy.
Definitely. Those were some great insights. Thank you for sharing those. So, coming back to you, Mr. Raghav, how can companies embrace a growth mindset going forward to inspire a lifelong learning within the organization, across the organization, and create an agile workforce and an agile management?
Yeah, and can I say, I mean, just listening to Dale, right, and as somebody who's a regular Swiggy user, it's a lot. It's very
We all
interesting to
are.
see what happens behind the scene a little bit. So super
Yes.
interesting to hear you share some of those insights. And just coming back to your question, right? So, um, I think I think there's lots of insight which is helping us drive learning amongst working professionals, right? I think it's important to realize all of us are very focused on the work that we do, and
Mhm.
learning needs to happen alongside that, and it's not easy, right? I have 50 things on my plate to do, so to find that 1 hour, 2 hours to learn may or may not be easy, right? One of the pieces of insight that we put out, and this was, I think, last year, we looked at for listed companies. This was not for non-listed companies. We looked at listed companies, and we said, look, we can measure the stock performance of these listed companies, and because
Mhm.
many of them provide learning to their employees on the Coursera platform, we're also able
Oh,
to track what is the skill level that they have in their organization. And we
all
said,
right.
let's look at, is there a correlation between stock performance and skill level in an organization? And what one
Mhm.
would expect to be the case that, better stock performing companies have higher levels of skill proficiency came
All
out to
right.
be true as well, right? And so we showed that to a lot of founders, we showed that to a lot of CHROs, we showed that to a lot of CTOs and so on. And we said, look, this does make a strong case for you to be investing behind learning in your organization. And it made a lot of sense to various leaders in companies. The second thing
Great.
that we found was very tactical, right? We said, look,
Mhm.
you're a working professional, but if we can come and encourage you as a data analyst or a data scientist or a machine learning engineer, whoever you might be, to come
All
in
right.
and take a diagnostic to tell you where you stand in terms of your skills, either in your city or in your country or globally, it might
Mhm.
give you a good benchmark of what your skill levels are. And let's see what is the impact of that on your willingness and your motivation to learn.
Okay.
And we found that people who come and took a diagnostic,
Mhm.
almost immediately the same day they wanted to enroll into courses because it was, a little bit eye opening to say, look, this is what my skill level is, and I want to go out and start, building skills because there's so much which is happening in this space.
Absolutely.
And we also found that people who came and took a diagnostic, spent 66% more time on actual learning minutes over the next 6 months because it was a little bit of a kick in the back, or a motivator to say, look, I should be building my skills. So we actually took this insight which came up by running various experiments and launched something that we call level sets, right? It sets your level in terms of where your skill levels are. And you can do
Mhm.
that as an individual. You can do that as a software engineering team or a data science team. You can do that as an organization as well,
All right.
right? So these are a couple of data points which I'm sharing, that whether linking skill levels to business performance, or whether at an individual level, linking what your proficiency level are is to
Mm.
generate motivation, are how we've been able to go out to, I would say, close to 3,000, 4,000 companies who are running fairly large programs on the
Correct.
Coursera platform. And it's important to call out that while there are skilled people available in India, it is a big challenge as well, right? We're all listening and watching about, what's happening in terms of the talent war in India. And the number of, whether it is software engineers, whether it is data analysts, data scientists that are coming online, is
Mm-hmm.
far short of the amount of demand that is available in the country. So a lot of companies are actually investing significantly in learning and development programs, and saying, look, we will actively work with individuals in our company, to possibly get a business analyst to get upskilled to a data analyst, and so on and so forth. And so those are some of the topics I would say in Ruchiraa, in terms of how companies are working towards building this culture of learning in-house.
Uh, Definitely. Thank you for sharing those, Mr. Raghav. But you spoke about leadership within the organization earlier. So I'd like to come back to that. How do you think one can inculcate an internal boardroom agenda that fosters leadership within the organization?
Yeah. So firstly, like I was saying, right, I think as organizations scale, and also as many of us will continue to work remotely even after the pandemic goes away, we've seen this new need for human skills, and leadership is a key element of that is becoming more important. And second thing, at Coursera, we believe that, look, only the senior executives in the companies are not the ones who need to have leadership skills as well, right? Even individual contributors in your work need to be leading whatever you're doing. And the third element has been that because it's a soft skill, sometimes it can be fuzzy, right? How do I build a leadership skill per se?
Leadership.
So one of the things that we've done is we've launched a leadership academy where we've simplified. Look, I'm an individual contributor. I want to build my skills in storytelling because I'm a data scientist and I should be able to tell story with data.
Mhm.
How do I do that? And we've kind of built a learning pathway which says, look, here's how you can build a skill there. Or we've taken a role like a new manager and
Mhm.
made it simple, right? We've said, look, to become a new successful manager, you should know 6 skills: team management, people management, change management, conflict management, and so on and so forth. And if these are the 6 skills that you should build, then here are 4 courses, 2 projects that you should do where you can actually build skills to be a new manager. So, if you think about an organization, you need
Mhm.
people to build skills in leading themselves. So we call that the lead yourself bucket. Then there are people who
All
should be
right.
leading teams. And then there are finally senior executives who should be leading organizations. They're
Mhm.
managing businesses, they're managing managers. And so building this leadership academy that we've done is actually helping quite a bit in just demystifying this process of building meaningful leadership skills.
All right. And what's your insight here, Dale? How are you fostering leadership within the organization?
Yeah, so I think at Swiggy, we start with values. We spent a lot of time over the last few quarters redefining our values. And for us, I think leadership begins by having the right value mix that we believe will work for Swiggy, work for the team, and then of course work for the individual. So we've
Mm.
defined around 11 key values that we believe are key to any strong leader at Swiggy. And these values go from how you behave to how you act, and
Mm.
and kind of lay a framework for how leadership in Swiggy has to evolve. For example, talking about learning, one of the key values we have is always be curious, always be learning, which is an explicit value, which really for me stands for how much Swiggy appreciates this continuous learning culture that we need. And no matter which level you are in the organization, the junior most person to the highest person, you are expected to always display a learning mindset and always think
Yes.
about how can you improve.
Mhm.
Another key leadership value we have is never settle, where we talk
All
about
right.
how we want to be 1% better every single day.
Mhm.
And this is another one of those leadership values that for us drives a lot of behaviors and how people think and how people look to improve upon themselves every single day. So starting with the values, we then went on from there to say, let's talk about, there are two ways in which we can coach people to become better on these values. One are more structured learning guides, and this is where we've partnered with institutions and resources to help us get access to content
Mhm.
material that will help people improve. And
Right.
that's where you have companies like Coursera and others who are helping institutions get access to more structured learning material.
Mhm.
And then the second is where we said, let's focus also on kind of learning through sharing our own internal stories. So here we spend a lot of time where Swiggy leaders talk to other leaders. We have mind share sessions where our founders talk to the group. We have leadership connects where we
Mhm.
explain. We also have managers talking to other managers. We have engineers talking to other engineers. So
All right.
lots of forums within the organization, all the way from tech talks to CEO level meetups, where
Mhm.
we are always trying to share knowledge and essentially inculcate leadership by people referencing good role models within Swiggy whom they can look up to. So I guess it's the combination of both structured learning programs and some of these
All right.
more teaching by telling kind of programs that we are using to build leadership at Swiggy.
Great. Thank you. And coming back to Mr. Ramneek, at Lenskart, how are you developing leaders of tomorrow as you are scaling up and growing?
Yeah, so in our case, we are looking at it from a different, little bit of different angle.
All
So
right.
as the businesses scale and startup enters the scale phase, to
Mhm.
accelerate growth, what we really need is leaders which, much like founders, wear all different kind of hats. They should be
All right.
able to leverage all the levers available to them, be it technology, marketing, or operational excellence.
All
Anything
right.
under the sun, which is the key for the business or unit or any project or endeavor that they're driving. So
Mhm.
what we are looking at is developing a lot of our talent internally by giving them exposure to a lot of different areas so that we eventually get a lot of single threaded leaders which are able to take charge of their area and drive them towards the growth. And
Mhm.
in our opinion, that is the only way to ensure that we are firing on all cylinders.
All right. Great. Thank you so much. And just before we wrap up, one last question for all of you, and that is about the growth of business. So, as businesses grow, it's very important to map the success as well. So, what are the important metrics that you have employed within your organization to gauge success, whether it is tech growth, people growth, or any other aspects that you have used?
When we look at success, we start from the customer. So for us, our biggest measure of success even now is whether customers love the product that we have. We look at customer NPS as a measure of that love. And we obsess about that. We look at different areas where through the experience, consumers may go through what we call pits, which are
All right.
essentially distraction moments, or they may go through peaks, which are delight moments. And our goal is to minimize the pits and maximize the detraction. So for us,
All right.
definitely consumer love is our first big metric of success. Beyond that,
Mhm.
obviously, you have some of the key business growth metrics. But what's also important from us, from our long-term perspective, is organizational development. So we are very
Mhm.
focused also on looking at saying how are we growing as an organization, how are we making sure that we are building an institution, building an organization that will scale with time, creating more
Mhm.
leadership bench, looking at the pyramid of the organization in terms of the maturity of the team we have, the experience of the people we have, and
All
seeing
right.
how well we can scale over time. So I would say it's a combination of customer metrics, business metrics, and organizational development metrics that help give us this overall scorecard of how we are doing at Swiggy.
Great. Thank you, Dale. And I'm sure you know that all your customers also love Swiggy. We all order every weekend.
Thank you.
Great. Mr. Ramneek, what is your insight here?
No, I'll agree with Dale over here that customer is the most important. I mean, tracking your customers and making sure they're happy is the number one metric. So we also track it using Net Promoter Score internally. That is the number one metric for us. Then, other than that, we try to stay away from a lot of vanity metrics, which can look good and try take you away from core of the business. So,
Mhm.
other than Net Promoter Score, we look at new user growth, revenue, employee NPS, and profitability as some of
All
the
right.
key metrics for us.
Great. Thank you. And coming back to you, Mr. Raghav, what would you like to share? What are the important metrics that you think organizations can use, whether it's tech growth or people growth?
So the metrics are fairly, I would say, consistent for us as well, right? Whether it's the business health, what the customers are telling us, or it's the organizational health. Maybe I
Mhm.
can pick this up from a slightly different point of view, right? How do we get 1,200 odd people in different parts of the world to be focused on the same metrics, right? That's
All right.
that's also something that takes a lot of thoughtful work. And what we do at Coursera is we've adopted the OKR methodology, which a lot of Silicon Valley companies use as well,
All right.
right? So
Mhm.
objectives and key results, and on one page, CEO down to employees in all parts of the world,
Mhm.
everybody can see on one single sheet of paper what is it that the company is focused on for a given quarter or for a given year, right? Whether it be at a new product development level, or whether it be at a customer feedback level, or whether it be at an employee, feedback level, and so on. And we find that this focus on, OKRs, and focus on having this transparency of information across the
Mhm.
world helps a lot in not just having the right metrics, but inculcating that across the organization and driving adoption of those metrics as well.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. That was a very interesting and insightful discussion on effectively scaling up the digital operation of startups. Thank you so much for sharing these insights. And just to sum up, definitely companies need to be prepared to weather crises with a flexible, knowledgeable workforce and culture that is built on resilience. And leaders of digital natives definitely need to address issues like team culture, leadership culture, work technology, and work processes, and focusing on upskilling and reskilling to stay agile and future ready. Thank you all for watching this show, and thank you all for joining in.